Hi there, everyone. So my name's Dan Barton, and I'm the lead sustainability consultant at Landscape Business Solutions. And today we're going to be talking about sustainability. So what I've done is I've divided the subject, as you can imagine, quite a large subject, up into the sections that you can see on your screen at the moment. And what I'll do, work through each one of those. Because people are from such a wide range of backgrounds and different businesses, fairly high level, a lot of the stuff that I'm going through, but then there'll be plenty of time at the end to kind of go into maybe some more specific questions related to your business. So today we're going to be looking at energy usage, kind of monitoring performance and setting KPIs within the business. Talking a bit about reduce, reuse, recycle, the circular economy, water usage, waste, transport and supply chain, which is quite an important part, biodiversity, a little bit on carbon offsetting, and then relating that back to the UN's sustainability goals, and then talking about some of the additional areas of sustainability beyond kind of being green and environmental, in terms of community and staff well-being. And then lastly, looking at some of the accreditations that may be of interest to you. So we shall start off with a bit of an introduction as to what sustainability is. So sustainability is basically about operating your business in a way that it does not prevent it from operating in the future. So it's basically ensuring that your business can continue to trade in a similar way, and you're not doing anything to damage it or the environment around you that would negatively impact either. And as I'm sure we're all aware, the whole idea of sustainability is becoming more and more important to consumers, and that's at a kind of a B2C level with customers looking for products which have got a bit more of a sustainable background, but also for larger tenders and B2B contracts. Governments and stuff are looking at businesses and judging them on their sustainability before awarding contracts to them. So it's a real way that you can kind of differentiate yourself from others, but kind of by doing that you can deliver additional revenue, additional footfall to the business. But there's a positive impact that you can have by being a leader in that sector. So by being a bit more sustainable and by talking about it, others will see what you're doing and hopefully follow in your footsteps, and it can actually move a whole industry forward. So often people think when it comes to sustainability that it's an anti-profit. It's basically you're going to reduce the amount of profit that you're making because you've got to operate in a more sustainable way. So that's not necessarily the case. So there's often things with sustainability that can make your business more profitable, and it can open up kind of new innovative ways of trading, manufacturing, producing, and it might actually help you become a little bit more profitable. But we shall start off with energy usage. So energy, obviously a big part, and has more recently become very, very important to businesses. So at the moment, with prices as they are, it's very difficult to tell people to shop around. But ultimately, if you can choose to select a renewable energy supplier, what you're doing is you're putting money into a sector which is ultimately producing energy more sustainably. As that sector grows because of the increased demand, it just helps to kind of move our energy production towards more sustainable levels. And it also means that you as a business know that the electricity that you're using is backed by it being produced somewhere that is from a renewable source. So that's one way you can switch energy suppliers. But more recently, a lot of businesses are coming to us and talking about solar panels. The business case for solar panels was always good. They've got a really good payback period of maybe like 4 to 5 years, depending on the install and the amount of energy that you're using. But obviously, as energy prices increase, then that business case just gets better. Unfortunately, because of the demand in the market at the moment, the actual cost of installs has actually gone up a little bit, but you're still looking at making quite a significant saving by putting solar panels onto your building, obviously dependent on the amount of energy that you use. And one of the important things to think about if you are looking at solar, and we can pick up some more kind of detailed questions at the end, but you've got to think about when you use your energy and maybe adjust your business processes to reflect that. So for example, we've got solar panels at home and I haven't got any batteries. So that means when the sun's shining, I'm producing an awful lot of electricity. So at that point is when we put the washing machine on or the tumble dryer on, and we try and use that energy at that point, because when the sun goes down, then obviously we're just buying it from the grid again. So where your energy comes from is quite a key thing in terms of the usage, but the other part of it is really comes down to how much energy you use. Now, you can obviously tell if you've got a smart meter or any type of meter how much energy you've used over the quarter or during the day, but do you really understand what are the high energy functions of your business and where is it that all the energy is going? So one of the things we recommend for this is you can buy mini meters, which will basically allow you to section off certain parts, certain machines, etc., and really start to understand how much energy they're using. Because what you want to do is you want to try and make changes that don't impact the operation of the business, obviously, in a negative way, but kind of give you the biggest return in terms of energy saving for the changes that you're making. So understanding where that usage is going is the key to that at the beginning. So obviously things like switching to LED lighting is a really quick way of reducing the energy down that you're using. And if you've got kind of older products in terms of like refrigeration units and things like that, upgrading to the highest efficiency units you're going to cut usage down. But I'm also aware that at the moment everyone's looking at their bills and has probably done as much cutting as they possibly can, really, that's feasible. So the next step is to look at the way that your business is operating from a sustainability point of view or an energy reduction point of view. So if I took, for example, some form of a baker's. Now, if they were turning the oven on and heating it up and baking and then switching it off, letting it cool down and then turning it back on again later on in the day, every time that oven has to heat up and cool down, you're using additional energy. If they could then batch all their cooking into the morning so that the oven stays hot for a period of time, there's obviously less energy being used at that point. So it's about looking at your processes again and what you're doing and thinking, is there something that we could do slightly differently? I mean, obviously the operation of the business again has to be paramount, but is there something you can tweak just to kind of cut back on the amount of energy that you're using? And a big part of energy consumption comes down to the actual premises that you're operating from. And you've got energy going in there to heat it, or in the summer to keep it cool, but look at what things you can do to try and mitigate the amount of energy that's being used. So insulation and removing drafts is probably the best way of spending your money to get your energy bills down. So in this case, thinking about loft insulation, and which is relatively cheap, relatively low skill to put down, so it doesn't cost you too much in terms of labor and can make a real difference to a property if there is no loft insulation in there at the time. And again, removing drafts with a bit of cork or expanding foam or even like a curtain over certain things, you can cut down on those cold breezes coming in and hopefully reduce the amount of energy you need for heating. Likewise, in the summer, people are working in buildings. You've got a lot of machinery running. People are moving backwards and forth, and if the sun's belting through the window, your air conditioning machine might be working a lot harder than it actually needs to. So is there anything that you can do to add additional shading into the building? If you're looking at new premises, have a good think about which way that it faces. Does it get the sun all day? Is that a good thing? Do you want it to be warm in there, or do you need it cooler? Depending on what you're trying to do in there as a business. And another thing that comes up quite often is temperature between different parts of the business. So you might have a busy warehouse function. People are on their feet all day, running around. They'll be feeling warm, but the warehouse doors are open, and everyone who's sitting at their desks in the office function is freezing, and they've got big electric heaters going on underneath their desk, and all that heat is going out straight out through the warehouse door. So is there any way that you can separate the way that you're set up to try and keep the people who are less active warm and kind of insulated away, and those that kind of need to be accessing the outside separate? And equally, you can do this with machinery. So for example, the obvious thing is don't put your fridge and your freezer right next to something that's really hot, because it will need to work harder. Don't block radiators with furniture. Have a look at the kind of the way that where you're working is set up, and look at it from a sustainability point of view, just trying to optimize the conditions for any machinery or heating that you've got in there. So important point of this is really is to set yourself some goals and to understand where you are. So I touched on measuring energy usage in terms of electrical usage, but you may also have oil, gas, you've got business miles, fuel that's being used, but you can also monitor things like waste to landfill. So the idea here is that you start monitoring now, and this is just an internal thing for you to check, but what you need to do is understand where you as a business stand, are operating now. And then as you start to make changes and trying to adapt to a more sustainable model, what you can do is you can see, all right, well, we did change that process, and look, our electricity bill has reduced significantly off the back of that. One thing to remember, though, with all of these things is that you need to tie that energy usage to something tangible within the business, such as revenue. Because if your business doubles in size, then your electricity bill is likely to go up at that point. Now, it might be that you're actually producing your goods much more efficiently, but what it would show is it would show that you're actually becoming less efficient. So you need to tie that in, so that as the business grows and you are busier, that you have a KPI that reflects that, basically. So you can set yourself goals, or a number of goals, and then you can track your performance against those goals. And what it does is basically, by tracking different areas, you can see which parts of your business are impacting the most in terms of carbon footprint. And then what you can do is then you can start to tackle those bigger areas. So, for example, I worked with a business more recently. It was an HR business, very office-based, and we kind of worked out roughly where their carbon footprint was, and 75% of it was commuting and office travel. So really, if they could start doing more recycling in the office, and put in the bins and stuff like that, but if they really wanted to make a big impact, reducing that business mileage, maybe allowing people to work from home a couple of days a week, or doing a few more Zoom calls, that's where they're going to make the big impact. And for hopefully a relatively little change to the business in the way that it operates. I thought I'd add an extra slide here on the term that probably everyone's heard of, reduce, reuse, recycle, because there's a view of there being a lot more to being just basically recycling, and then recycling really needs to be the last resort. So thinking about things, rethinking about them, refusing them and reducing them, you can stop that waste ever existing in the first place. So is there something that you can do to your processes in terms of, maybe I'm thinking here, packaging or something like that, which means that it doesn't need, there isn't as much product involved, and so therefore less waste at the end? Is there something that you can do in terms of refusing? Can you speak to your supply chain and discuss it with them and say why, and ask for a reduction in plastic wrap? Because ultimately, I speak to quite a few businesses and they get an awful lot of rubbish that comes in with the products that from their supply chain, and they've then got to pay to have that rubbish taken away. And ultimately, you're just looking at ways of reducing the amount of waste or product to the minimum. I mean, you've still got to provide the product safely and packaged well and looking nicely, but just trying to kind of minimize any wastage from that process. And then where you have got waste or items that you don't need, what can be done with those? Can they be reused again? Can you refurbish them, repair them, or repurpose them? So in terms of repair, when you're looking at buying new machinery or equipment, how easy is it to repair if something goes wrong? Is it a modular system where parts can be taken out and repaired and replaced? Or is it that if one part breaks on it, the whole thing's got to go in the bin? So it's just about re-looking at and kind of adding an extra layer to your decision making, and just kind of coming back to sustainability. And really the price and the quality of the product that you're purchasing in this instance will always be king. And I'm not telling you to go out there and buy something that's 10 times more expensive than it needs to be and doesn't really do the job that it wants, but it is sustainable. You've got to operate things from the business point of view. But if you can add sustainability to your decision-making process, and if you've got two similar products and you can't decide between the two, and one of them is winning on sustainability, but at least kind of analyzing them in that way, you can end up operating in a more sustainable way. And as I mentioned, recycle is really the last resort. So there will always be an element of waste within the business, but when you have you've done all the kind of rethinking and refusing that you can, you've reused and you've refurbished, make sure that recycling is available. Basically, make sure you have bins on site, bins that are easy to use, especially if you've got a lot of staff that you're encouraging to use them. The easier that you can make that, putting things in the recycling bin, the more take up you're going to get of it. It's about making things easy for people to be a bit more sustainable. So then I thought that kind of carries on a little bit to the circular economy. And really the circular economy is about taking in raw materials. Will always be required to be taken from the earth, but when they're taken and used once and then dumped in a landfill, then that's not a sustainable way of operating. The more goods and resources that we can have going round in a circular economy, the better ultimately. So raw materials come out. There's a design process. So maybe looking at the way that your products are designed with sustainability in mind. There's production and manufacturing and distribution that come back to the consumer, and then hopefully not too much is going to waste. And then at that point is where things can be reused, repurposed, and perhaps by someone in a completely different industry. So there was a company that I was speaking to recently, a restaurant, and receive an awful lot of cardboard in all their deliveries, and were paying an awful lot of money because of where they were located for someone to come along and pick up their rubbish and basically take it away. Now, they ended up working with another business who was desperate for packaging material and was spending an awful lot on kind of plastic bubble wrap style packaging material for their drinks to be posted out. Now, they bought a cardboard machine. The cardboard now is shredded on site, passed over to the drinks manufacturer, and the drinks manufacturer actually pays a small amount of money back to the business. So what's happened there is it's gone from something that was a cost to actually something that's making a little bit of money. And in both instances, both businesses are operating in a slightly more sustainable way. So really, it's about thinking about the waste products that your business produces and could they be used elsewhere. That won't always be the case, but it's worth looking through it with that view in mind. And then, but also thinking, are there any businesses that have got a waste problem that you could kind of take their waste and use in your production processes? Now, to get this really going, you need to be quite innovative in your thinking, and it will be very specific to the industries that you're working in. But networking is quite a key part of this. So building up a network of like-minded people in terms of sustainability, you've kind of got similar goals and aims as you. They don't have to be in the same industry, but you can kind of learn from each other. You can hear about what other people are doing, and also just following news stories and stuff of what other people are doing, and just try understanding, because sustainability is something where people are pushing forward all the time. Innovations are being made, and people are kind of leading the way. Ultimately, you want to be one of those people who's leading the way, but there's plenty of people doing that who could give you some good tips as you kind of get on your feet. And one of the organizations that I would recommend that you get involved with, if this is something that would be of interest to you, is the Waste and Resources Action Programme, WRAP. So they will actually come into your business and help you reduce the amount of waste, basically, and get those resources employed as efficiently as possible. So they're experts. Quite often the help they offer is free. I'm certain that the initial site visit is, and it can be a really good way of having someone come into the business and offer you some really good tips about how you can basically be more sustainable, but also a bit more profitable as well. Next is water usage. So this is another big area. So again, businesses, depending on what sector in and what you're actually producing, you will have a hugely different water requirement. So what I've done is I've just talked about the kind of water usage that most businesses would have. So flushing the toilet is the first one. It's one of the biggest in households, and therefore, especially if you've got a lot of staff, it can be a real big one for businesses as well. And you'll have probably noticed that the size of toilet cisterns has reduced over the years. Now, if you're still stuck with one of those really big cisterns that's filling up each time with liters and liters of water that it doesn't really need, they can actually be adapted quite easily to reduce the amount of water required. The cheapest way is to put something in that cistern that takes up the volume of water. So you can buy things called hippo bags, which basically just sit in there and fill that space up. I've seen people do it with bricks. They just put a couple of bricks in the toilet cistern, but it just means that each time you're not using as much water. The other thing, you can actually harvest rainwater yourself. Now, obviously, you can't be using this for drinking necessarily or for putting into products, but it could be used for watering any green spaces that you've got. If you've got a bit of money to invest, you could potentially look at grey water systems. So grey water would basically takes anything other than toilet water, so water from sinks and showers, and puts it through a very basic filtration system, and then it can be used again potentially on for growing plants, etc. Or alternatively, you could put that water from the sink back into the toilet system, and it can flush the toilet for you each time. So you're not using fresh water, because in this country we use the cleanest drinking water we can, and we flush the toilet with it. So it doesn't always need to be of that sort of quality just to flush the toilet. And and then lastly, again, it's looking at your processes and how you operate as a business. Is there a way that you can reduce the amount of water that you use in the day-to-day operation of the business? And that's just by looking at your processes. Can the water be reused? Obviously, you've got to keep cleanliness, etc., like as to the required standard. But is there anywhere that water can be reused? Next section is the transport and supply chain. And as I hinted before, with that HR company that I've been dealing with, transport has a huge impact on the environment, and also can be one of the biggest areas where you produce carbon or negative gases going into the air. I was speaking to a vending company the other day. They had 25 vehicles, and each vehicle was driving 400 miles a day. And he was really concerned about the amount of empty miles he was driving. He was going out delivering his goods, but then the vans were coming back empty. And he wanted to kind of maximize his usage of that. So what he was talking to his clients about is when he's going out in his vans, dropping the product off. But at that point, he would offer a service to pick up the waste from the products. He was actually someone who sold gyms, drinks, and kind of nutrition bars. But he was looking at kind of collecting that waste from the gym and then bringing it back, and then processing the waste at his site, and then potentially passing it on to the recycling company at that point. So he's then offering a kind of a fuller service to his clients. It means that they're also a bit more committed to him, because they've got an additional service, and he's not really costing him that much money. And he's already got these kind of empty transport miles, which he's basically utilizing more efficiently. Other things to think about, if you're looking at a new site, how close is it to public transport links? Can people travel in via public transport? How easy is it to get to? Or do you have to have a car? Is there anything you can do with staff in terms of lift shares for commuting? Is that something that you can encourage within the business? And is there anything you can do to make that a bit easier, or to encourage that amongst staff? Electric vehicles, they're here. They don't meet all of the needs of every business, but is it something that's feasible to you? I would definitely consider it if you think it is. And then batching deliveries. This is coming back to, again, like looking at the way that your business operates and trying to change your internal processes to make things more efficient. So if you're going up, if you're driving from South Wales to North Wales on a Monday to deliver one product, and then you're going back on a Tuesday, is that the most efficient way of doing it? Now, obviously, that's a very basic example, but are there any other tweaks that you could do to the way that you operate to reduce the amount of miles that you're doing? And lastly, vehicle maintenance and driver training. If you haven't got the money to go out and replace a fleet with electric vehicles, or it might not be feasible for you at the moment, you can make quite a big difference by ensuring those vehicles are well maintained, and also the way that they're driven, by offering a bit of training into safe but sustainable driving. So not really revving the engine when it doesn't need to be, etc., turning it off and instead of leaving it idling. You're going to make some savings there, potentially, if staff are kind of are not that way inclined at the time. Supply chain is a really big area, and probably one which we could do a whole hour on, but I've shrunk it down into this one. So ultimately your supply chain is part of your carbon footprint. So if you've got a business which you're purchasing raw materials from, the way they operate is very important to how you that it's aligned to basically how you want to operate. Because otherwise what you could do is you could set up two businesses. One could be doing all sorts of kind of ecological disasters, at which point they pass everything over to the second business that kind of rubber stamps it and says, look, we're not doing anything bad for the environment, look how green we are. But they've just pushed all of the kind of the negative impacts down into their supply chain. So when looking at supply chain partners, obviously the closer that they can be, the better. But also, do they have the same sort of goals and aspirations as you do? And is there anything that you can do to work together to reduce the impact that you have? Like, is there some sort of reusable packaging that they could send to you, and then you return back to them, and so you don't have so much waste? Now, again, from a business point of view, you've got to select the supply chain that is right for you, that is offering the best price and quality of goods. But sustainability should be part of your decision-making process, and it should factor into how that business is selected. Biodiversity, also something very important, as is the amount of carbon and the business is producing. So does your business have any space around it that could be reused or repurposed to encourage biodiversity? Is one way of looking at it, but also ensuring that what you do as a business doesn't negatively impact on biodiversity as well. So ensuring that if you are using any harsh chemicals or anything like that, there's no risk of them kind of infecting a waterway if there was any sort of spillages or a fire or anything like that. But on a more positive note, then could you introduce some kind of native wildflowers or natural hedging around the site to kind of encourage insects, birds, and small mammals? So creating habitats or homes around the area. Again, if you're a food producer, you may not want to have animals around the site, and that might be completely inappropriate for you. But if it is something that works well with your business, it's something that you can have a look at, and a kind of an unused piece of land can actually end up having quite a positive impact. Looking at carbon offsetting. So with carbon offsetting, what you're trying to do is basically offset the residual amount of carbon that your business is producing. And residual is the key word there. So the first part of carbon offsetting is to measure, to understand how much carbon you are producing and is going into the world. Mitigate after that, and that is the reduction process. So trying to reduce that carbon down to the absolute minimum, and that's by doing all the things that I've just been discussing previously. And offsetting really should just come in for that residual amount. Now, there's always going to be a residual amount, unless you're a very specific business, but offsetting can then have a positive impact. But there are problems with the carbon offsetting market. It's a bit of a wild west. Farmers potentially plant trees and then sell the carbon that tree captures 3 or 4 times over. Big monocultures of tree planting aren't necessarily the greatest thing for the environment. A lot of farmland can potentially be taken up by these projects, and trees take an awful long time to grow to maturity and really start bringing in, start capturing carbon at a serious level, and are very at risk from wildfires. So people always think about tree planting when it comes to offsetting, but there are other options that you can do, and have a look online. make sure you do your research if this is something that you are interested in, and that you're dealing with a reputable company. But some businesses will offer, for example, decarbonisation of a village in Africa, and their cooking and heating. So you would, instead of paying into a fund that plants trees, you'd be paying into a fund that decarbonises the cooking activities of a village in Africa. So you can have that same sort of carbon impact, but potentially in a better way. So yeah, so that's carbon offsetting, and if there are any more questions, we can kind of pick those up at the end. I thought what I'd do is I'd try and tie the idea of sustainability, because it is such a wide idea and such a kind of growing and developing sector, back to something that basically is, I see more and more in documentation, and it's basically what governments and an awful lot of businesses are working towards. So these were actually these UN Sustainable Development Goals were put together in 2015. They also highlight that it's not just about being green. So I will run through them. There's 17 of them, and then they break down into around 200 kind of lower level requirements. There's lots of information about them online, and you can go to the website and kind of really read up into ones that are particularly of interest to you. So there's no poverty, zero hunger, health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work, economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life on land, peace, justice and strong institutions, and partnerships for the goals. So you can see that there is a real wide area there, and we're not just talking about switching off your car engine and putting some solar panels on the roof. And my advice to you is, if sustainability is something that's important to you and it is something that you really want to pursue, that you select a couple or a few of those, and then really kind of work underneath those as kind of titles, and try and focus your impact into one of those areas. And if it's something you're passionate about and interested in, all the better. So it might be also that it's particularly suited to your business. If your life below water could be very interesting to someone who takes products from the sea, for example, because they need to ensure that what they're doing is sustainable, and also that the quality of the products they're taking from the sea is not diminished by pollution, etc. So have a look on the website and kind of dive into a few areas which you think would be interesting to you. And there's plenty of kind of help and resources on there to kind of give you a bit more understanding. And then carrying on from that idea of sustainability not just being green, I guess, there are other things you can do as a business. And corporate social responsibility, or CSR, is probably something that you may have heard of. And there's a certain amount of cynicism around it. I've worked for a lot of corporates, and sometimes it's something that's paid lip service to. Sometimes it's something that's actually really important to the business. But really what this is about, and you don't have to be a large corporate, is giving something back to the community that is around you. And this could be anything from kind of offering your advice or expertise to others for free, or volunteering, or giving your staff the opportunity to volunteer on a work day at a certain event, or just doing something that's more positive in your local area. Another part of this, and picked up in the UN's goals, is kind of investing in people, that quality education and decent work. So investing in people, offering them abilities to train and to grow and to develop is something else that's important for sustainability, as is staff well-being, ensuring that that staff are kind of happy in their work, that stress is reduced to a minimum, and that people know that there's someone there kind of looking out for them a bit. And it's also something that, again, it can have a real positive impact on your business, because staff with good well-being and tend to be more productive, and tend to be more engaged in the business and what you're trying to achieve. And lastly, equality and inclusion. So this is equality across all aspects, but gender equality is widely regarded as a key catalyst for sustainable development, economic growth, and the fight against poverty. And that came from those UN sustainability goals. So just ensuring that staff feel valued and allow them to benefit from the success of the company. And accreditations, which I think is, the last slide. So there are lots of accreditations that you can consider going for. Here are just 4 of them. There's the Investors in Environment accreditation. There's a nice step-by-step approach, allows you to kind of set achievable targets and kind of build like a continuous improvement model. I'll come back to the B Corps. There's ISO 14001. Now, some of you may be mandated to have this and have already got this in place. This is a very technical legislative form of accreditation. And then there's Green Dragon. So again, something that's awarded to businesses with effective environmental management and controls. Just shows that they've got a good understanding of how their business is operating in terms of sustainability. And I said I'd come back to B Corp. B Corp is probably the standard that is becoming more and more popular with businesses, and more companies are growing towards it. Lanska is currently applying to become a B Corp, and a large number of our clients are. It is not a task that should be undertaken unless you have the time and commitment to give it, because it is quite a significant piece of work. There are 200 kind of points which you get scored on, and you will need to provide documentation to kind of show that your business is operating in an ethical way. But it's sustainability plus, so it brings in all the aspects of ethics in the way that the business runs, and really kind of covers off all of the areas that we've discussed in this presentation, and ultimately for me is probably the gold standard as things stand at the moment. So that's my kind of very quick run through of what sustainability is. We've got 15 minutes left at the end, so what I thought I'd do is open it up to any questions that any of you may have.
Thanks, Dan. Lots of information covered in there. Does anybody want to come off their mic and ask Dan now while you've got the expert in the room with you? Or I think he's covered quite a lot, but.
Hi, Dan. Russ here, up in North Wales at Zip World. Just so you rated B Corp above ISO 14001.
Sorry, only in that ISO 14001 is a requirement for businesses to meet, and obviously if you need that for your business to operate, then that obviously has to come key. But for me, B Corp is more encompassing of all aspects of sustainability.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. That's good.
Any other questions?
Hi, I've got one, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yes, carry on.
We do a lot currently with sustainability. I work at Jan Power in Pembroke Dock, so it's a big old building. So I think that naturally over time we've taken on a lot of sustainable practices. It's a big unit sort of run with solar panels and biomass and what have you. But where we struggle with sustainability is trying to get engagement from the teams. And we're certainly the type of business that could do a lot more. So have you got any advice on how to even start introducing sustainability and getting the teams to really engage with it? Because we find that there's only really two topics internally which we struggle with. Unfortunately, one of them can sometimes be health and safety, the other sustainability, you know, in terms of the excitement factor.
Yeah, of course. I guess one of the things is leading from the top. So basically setting out to the staff what your clear ambitions are, and very clearly setting some goals and trying to keep those as simple as possible, and then really kind of explaining why it is important. Now you can tie that back to what is important to them. And the vast majority of employees, what's most important to them, I imagine, is the amount of money that they get paid. So if you can try and show them that potentially there's savings involved that make the business more profitable, that can, you know, gives them a more secure employment, that sort of things. It's about relating it back to what's going to be positive to them, as well as explaining why you're doing it. The other thing is making it as easy as possible. So obviously recycling bins, if everyone's having if the break area is on one side of the site and the recycling bins are on the other side of the site, then everything's just going to go in general waste. But if the recycling bins are nice and close, then you're more likely to get people to use them. Again, very basic example, but what is it that is stopping them from engaging in it? And also allowing them to feed back on what they think is important in terms of sustainability, or why they think sustainability isn't important. You need to understand basically where they're coming from, and why they're not taking it up, to really kind of deal with their problems head on, I guess.
Yeah, no, thank you. That is helpful. It's sometimes just knowing sort of where to start in terms of getting it back on the radar. We did genuinely have something similar with the health and safety side, really, and for us we had to like form a committee and things like that. So I don't know if that's again something.
Yes, that's exactly it. I mean, if you you can make someone a sustainability champion in a similar way to the committee by having a single point within a business. It just helps to focus everyone, and that person knows their responsibility, and everyone knows who to go to talk about it. It's also sustainability is something that often gets it's very important for a short amount of time. We've got to do something about this, and then normal business operations come along and it just gets dropped to the side. And staff can sometimes potentially see, this big initiative comes out, everyone's really excited about it, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and then it just kind of fizzles out. So trying to keep things at the forefront, and kind of including sustainability into management meetings, just so that it's something it's an ongoing part of the business, rather than something that kind of appears all of a sudden and disappears, and then staff lose interest.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Laura. Any other questions? Well, I'm guessing you've covered most things. If there's anything that you think of after the webinar that you wish you'd asked, then you can always contact myself at the AGP admin team, and I can forward any questions on to Dan then.
Yeah, always happy to look at those.
If you would like the recording, just so you can watch it again or go through anything you think you might have missed, that's fine. Just let me know as well. When I send out the feedback webinar, you can just reply to that email to me just to send you the link to the recording once it's been uploaded. It usually takes a day or so for it to be edited to go up for recording, but I can send those out to you as well. Dan, I don't know, do you share your slides if anybody wants them, or? Yeah,
very happy to share any information, and If anyone does have any additional questions, just feed them through. I'm always happy to have a chat. with people about anything really.
Fabulous. And you can always go to your relationship managers as well if there's anything that you query, or I think they're doing work packages on sustainability and equality, I believe.
Yeah, so
webinar is equality and diversity. So that's the titles for that are on the Eventbrite as well. Sorry, Dan, were you going to say?
No, that's right. Yeah, I was just saying, yeah, we through AGP we offer a number of packages. Basically, we can kind of there's a light touch one where we just kind of discuss a few top tips and offer you an environmental policy and action plan to help embed things into the business, all the way through to kind of much bigger work packages where we come and visit the site and spend a few days there and kind of develop a strategy with you, or even if it's kind of more specific kind of business decision making around should we get some solar panels, or what's the best way of reducing our carbon footprint, that sort of thing. So if there are any more kind of detailed help that you need, have a chat with your RM and we can hopefully get a work package put together.
Fabulous. Okay, so enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks, Dan, for giving up your time to go through this with us. And again, if you do want any of the information, just let me know with the reply to the webinar feedback email. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay dry, hopefully. I'm just glad that our internet kept up for that one, so we're okay now. We're good to go.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes.
Thank you.